Hey, hello, welcome to week 3 against RTK and the Portland Timburrs. This is my first time ever playing RTK. I had to go back and scout and watch a couple of his matches from not just the PPL, but his other leagues, kind of to see how he plays. And looking at his team, the first two things that pop off the screen and scare the hell out of me are his Mega Gardevoir and his Emboar. What switches into an Emboar? Nothing. Nothing I have on my team can switch into an Emboar. No bueno. He also brought the Kyurem, which I'm not too good at dealing with. I had trouble prepping for it. He brought the Hitmontop. My guess is defensive for my Megalopunny. The Vaporeon, which I need to find out if it's Roar, if it's Toxic, if it's Ice Beam, Protect, Wish, whatever. And of course, the Thundurus Incarnate, which can just slow down everything on my team and really help that Emboar, especially if it's a banded Emboar. I gotta sack something off every single time. I had Emboar last year. I didn't do too well with it, but when I did use it, I knew nothing switches into it. It hits like a fucking truck. So my team, to counter his team, is a Choice Scarfed Rotom Wash. It's modest, enough speed to outspeed Excelgor, I think. Outspeed an Excelgor that crept my Megalopunny, but he didn't bring that, so no big deal. I brought a mixed Jirachi, Hasty Nature, Iron Head, Psychic, did damage to some things, Energy Ball for the Vaporeon and the Rhyperior, which he didn't bring, and Stealth Rock. I have Dragonite was really hard for me. Originally, I had a Choice Banded Dragonite gen for me, but at the last minute, I looked at his team and I saw the only thing that could set up rocks was Rhyperior, and I have enough things to kind of take out Rhyperior so it doesn't set up some Stealth Rocks. So instead, I brought just the random OU Dragonite I had in my PC. It has a weakness policy with Dragon Dance, Roost, Dragon Claw, and Extreme Speed. I brought, again, Rock Polish Donphan, because if I set up a Rock Polish and I can weaken the Hitmontop and the Vaporeon, it's got an Earth Plate, 2-hit KOs with Earthquake against the Vaporeon. So I brought a Reuniclus, Calm Minds, enough speed to outspeed Rhyperior, which is useless because he didn't bring it. The rest is in special defense because the only offensive, physically offensive hard hitter he has is Emboar, and I'm not living a hit anyways. And finally, I'm bringing Megalopunny with Fake Out, Quick Attack, High Jump Kick, and Return. So looking at his team, I knew going in my lead was Choice Scarf Rotom because it dealt pretty well with the majority of his team. My guess his lead would probably be the Thundurus or the Emboar. So RTK is issuing a challenge. He leads with his Thundurus Incarnate Liam Neeson. I decide again to lead Mr. Sparkles because I know I can get a safe Volt switch off here. And looking at that damage, it did less than 50%, which means, you know, the only thing I wanted to switch in this was my Donphan, and Ice Shard doesn't do 50%. But luckily, I was expecting the electric attack, but he goes for the U-turn, and he reveals that he has a Life Orb, and now he is in range for an Ice Shard after that U-turn. He now switches out into his Kyurem, and this was, again, I need to find out what set this was, and Ice Beam takes me out, Dragon Pulse takes me out, Draco Meteor takes me out, so I decide to switch into, you know, my Jirachi, which is a nice neutral hit, but he predicts that perfectly and goes for the Earth Power, and that does well over half and reveals my leftovers. So I'm thinking this thing is probably Scarfed. It didn't have a Life Orb, isn't Specs, it's probably Scarfed to outspeed a +1 Dragonite. So I make the switch into my Rotom, but he also makes the switch into his Emboar. So that's good news for me. And I outspeed Emboar with Rotom every day of the week. I don't know what it is. I could have gone for the Hydro Pump and killed this thing, and I would have been so set if I would have killed Emboar, but I overpredict. He makes the ballsy play, stays in, and I'm just like, who is going to die? Donphan, you can go ahead and die. So he hits me with that superpower, and I can tell from that damage, he's not Choice Band. Choice Band would have clean killed me. And this next superpower is a roll if he's not, I don't know. It was a roll, so I just went for the Earthquake because, again, I had nothing that wanted to switch in. Maybe my Dragonite, but he probably predicted that and went into his Kyurem, which is making these great plays, predictions. But again, I was basically sacking off my Donphan, and I went for the Earthquake. Here, I saw he wasn't Specs or Life Orb, so I knew my Reuniclus could kind of take hits for this for days, not really having to worry about it. Again, if he has a physical attack on this thing, base whatever, it could hurt. So he switches out and goes into his Vaporeon, which I need to figure out this set. I go for a Psychic in case, you know, he wanted to expect me to recover or whatever and went into his Emboar, because Psychic would kill Emboar at the range now. But instead he goes into the Vaporeon, and I see that it's basically physically defensive. Probably another way to deal with Dragonite and Lopunny. And I just need to, if I can get to +1 and get rid of that Emboar, Reuniclus can handle the rest of his team. So I decided to go for the Calm Mind to see if this Vaporeon has Roar, or Ice Beam, or Protect, or whatever. He went for the Wish, I went for the Calm Mind. I'm at +1, I can take on the Gardevoir right now. And so I'm not gonna, you know, set up too early like I did in previous seasons. I just decided to go for the Psychic to get damage off if he has the Roar. I outspeed, he has the Roar. Luckily, he is down to 50% health and goes into my Rotom, which is awesome. But the Wish kicks in and he's back to full. So, Volt Switch is an obvious play here. So I go for the Discharge, hoping to get a cheeky paralysis off. Does over half, but he goes for the Baton Pass, thinking I'd probably go for the Volt Switch. He could take it and then get initiative, but the Discharge was my play. As he goes out into this thing, which just destroys my team. The Gardevoir and Discharge did less than 50%-ish, but a Hyper Voice had the chance to take me out. So I switch out into the only thing that could take one, and that is my Jirachi. Jirachi is Hasty Nature, like I said, max speed to Speed Tie with the Gardevoir. An Iron Head right here has a chance to take it out, a good chance to take it out. I live the Hyper Voice, so if I win the Speed Tie, I win for Iron Head, because, you know, if I can kill this Gardevoir, whatever. I lose the Speed Tie, and he takes me out with the Hyper Voice. So Gardevoir kills Jirachi. That's Gardevoir's first kill of the season. But, you know, you can't look past Gardevoir. I go into my Lopunny because I know a Fake Out plus Return can kill. I am not max speed. My Lopunny has enough speed to outspeed a Choice Scarf Emboar. So it's Jolly with 172 speed EVs. So I need to Fake Out to make sure I outspeed the Gardevoir. He switches into his Hitmontop. I go for the Fake Out. And as you can see, it does nothing, plus he's Rocky Helmet. So looking at it, that did more damage to me than it did to him. I know, you know, Stone Edge, he's probably have Stone Edge. He goes for the Toxic. Does not connect, it doesn't matter, Magic Card. But I know that this thing can't really touch my Reuniclus. So I decided to straight up go for a Calm Mind in case he wanted to switch into the Gardevoir, expecting a Psychic. He could tank that, no problem, and then blow me back with a Hyper Voice. So I go for +1. And here, he could go for a U-turn to do over half to me. But then, what would his switch-in be? I could take a Hyper Voice at this range. I could take, if he goes for Emboar, I could kill that. So I went for the Psychic, as he goes for the Thunderbolt, and Reuniclus picks off the Thundurus, which is awesome. He can no longer paralyze my Lopunny or my Dragonite. And I'm now sitting at just about 80% health at +1/+1, giving him free range to go into his Emboar. So here I'm thinking he's got to go for the Flare Blitz, but I'm not willing to get rid of my Rotom, so I'll just straight up sack off my Donphan. Donphan didn't do much, could have done something, but didn't. And Emboar picks up the kill. Now right here, I'm thinking this thing is Choice Scarf. Gonna go into my Rotom and fire off a free Discharge because something has to switch in. No. He stays in and goes for Superpower because he's not Choice Scarfed. And look at that damage. That does freaking 70% to my Rotom. Granted, I'm not defensive, but the Discharge damage did do a lot to the Emboar, which means anything from Rotom from this point can take him out. He goes into his Hitmontop, which wasn't, you know, what would he switch into at this point? He still had the Kyurem, but he probably didn't want Kyurem to get paralyzed. So again, I see the Hitmontop. I'm going straight into my Reuniclus because I still need a way to take down his Mega Gardevoir. I need something to be at +1. Luckily for me, the Hitmontop is now at half health, and unless he has rest, he has no way to recover any health. So I go for the Calm Mind here as he switches out into his Gardevoir. The Gardevoir, again, between this and the Emboar, can just punch holes into any team. He made the switch, Keytrain for Emboar, and that helps his team so much because Reuniclus would have done so great had he had Heat Train instead of Emboar. But he goes for the Calm Mind, so he is an offensive Gardevoir. I knew he was already offensive from the Draji, but I go for the Shadow Ball, and I know he probably has max speed. So that Shadow Ball does about 45%, and his Hyper Voice, you can see this is a neutral Hyper Voice, does about 50%. So I go for the Calm Mind because I know that as long as I don't get crit next turn, I can take another hit. And this next turn, I can live the Hyper Voice. I'm going to go for Recover. I need to get my health back, hoping this thing does not have Wish. He goes for the Calm Mind, back to neutral, so I can get my health back and fire off another neutral Shadow Ball. Originally, if this thing is max attack, timid, or modest, Dragonite can come in, take our Hyper Voice, set up a Dragon Dance, get to +3, but because he's now at +2, there's no way Dragonite can take a hit. So the Hyper Voice goes off, and again, does about over half. I go for the Shadow Ball, just getting that damage I need to where he's in now in extreme speed range from Dragonite. After leftovers, I'm just a little under half, and I need to save Reuniclus because, again, if I get rid of that Emboar, Reuniclus can come in and take in everything. So I decide to sack off my Rotom. That's, again, I wasn't very defensive this week. My most defensive mon was Reuniclus. Everything else had to be sacked off to Gardevoir or Emboar. So I switch into my Lopunny. Up to this point, the game was, I felt like he had an advantage. He was making the right reads. I go for the return, and after the Intimidate, this is a 2-hit kill. But he has the Mach Punch. I could go for the Quick Attack. He had a chance to kill, I don't know, the roll or whatever, but I decide to go back into my Reuniclus to get the Recover off as he switches in to his Vaporeon, which sucks because at +1, Dragonite could have taken out Vaporeon at that range. But this gives him free range to just to heal up and, you know, shuffle my team around. So I go for the Recover as he decides to, instead of going for Wish, goes right for the Roar, which was, you know, good for me as he roars me out into Big Johnny. Now I'm thinking this thing is Ice Beam, or if I'm Lumberry, I can set up all over this thing, or he's going to go for a Roar. I go for the Dragon Dance. I'm at +1. My guess is the Kyurem is Scarfed. As he goes for Scald, if I don't get burned, I can win this game right here. Don't get burned, don't get burned, don't get burned, don't get burned. I don't get burned. All right. Unfortunately, my scale is broken, so my weakness policy is worthless. I can't take any super effective hit at this point. I go for the Dragon Claw. I know it's not going to kill. He's probably going to Roar. No. He Baton passes me out. Or he Baton passes out. And at this point, he brings in his Kyurem. And looking at that health he has on it, I don't know if I can kill. I could switch to my Reuniclus. I say fuck it. Let's go for the extreme speed. And I kill. Luckily, he was at like 39%, and the min roll was 42%. So the extreme speed was the right play. He goes into his Hitmontop. Now, I think he's probably going to go into his Gardevoir real quick. So I go for the extreme speed. I was thinking he was going to go for a Gardevoir, back to Hitmontop, Gardevoir. So I didn't go for the Dragon Claw. I thought he might have wanted to get, like, you know, double Intimidate on me. But at this point, Dragonite at +1 speed. I'm neutral now. Can clean up the rest of his team. And I pull off the 3-0 sweep. Dragonite got 5 kills. So I was very glad that at the last minute, this was literally the last minute, I messed up my EVs. You know, Trav's like, hey, does Rotom need speed? And I'm like, oh yeah, it needs max for whatever. But I gave him a spread with no speed. So I had to reset those EVs. And then I looked, I'm like, you know what? Let's bring Dragon Dance, Weakness Policy, Dragonite, and see how we go. And it pulled off for me. I got the 3-0. I am now 2 wins, 1 loss. After beating Kyle last week, which, oh, hacks, fuck it. This week, no hacks at all. I don't think there was any hacks. You know, he missed the Toxic, but it was on my Runiplus. Magic Card, doesn't matter. This was a win. The key moment was, instead of roaring me out with Vaporeon, he went for Baton Pass. He knew it. I didn't know it at the time. I was just, you know, trying to kill enough things to where Dragonite could come back in and clean up with extreme speed. That and my Lopunny. So I think even though the roar was huge for the Dragonite 5-0 sweep, I feel like, you know, Lopunny could have come in and cleaned up at that point. Again, the Kyurem was scarfed, but Reuniclus was at enough health to come in and switch into that. It would have been, like, depending on what Vaporeon passes Wish into mattered, whatever. But we get the win, nevertheless. Next week, we go up against Yo Fizz and the Atlanta Haluchas. They are undefeated at this point in time. Don't know how his match went this week, so he won his first 2 weeks, then he whatever this week, and then we play him next week. So stay tuned for that. That should be a good one. It's the one that, from the beginning of the season, I'm like, I can't wait to play Fizz. It'll be so much fun. Tune in for that, and thanks for watching.